Hey, good morning. Scott Luton, Greg White with you here on Supply Chain Now. Welcome to today's live stream. Greg, what show is this today?
I'm so excited for the show. I don't know exactly why, but I got a ton of energy back over this weekend. So I'm really excited about it. I mean, the supply chain buzz.
There we go.
Scott Luton and Greg White here with Supply Chain Now on the Supply Chain Buzz.
That is right. And our aim is to
raise your supply chain IQ.
That is right. So no shortage of topics to dive into today. What a busy week it's been across the global business community, especially the global supply chain community. Welcome y'all to weigh in, and we're going to cover 4 stories today. We're also going to talk about a couple of new series that we've recently launched. But the star of the show here is our audience, and we're looking forward to the observations and comments that they bring to the table on these developments as we cover them. Right, Greg?
We are indeed. And some faves already in: Joseph Moretta, Benjamin Goldklang, Lisa Kinsky. That's a new name to me. Has Lisa joined us before? You'll have to let us know.
Welcome, Lisa, regardless if you're a veteran of the buzz or a newbie today, welcome. Sap Tarshi. And I apologize up front.
Pretty good.
All right, good. Well, welcome. Thank you for joining us, Sap Tarshi. Jeffrey Miller, who had a lot of great contributions last week on the live stream with Jeff Cashman. Great to have him here. Danson via LinkedIn, Kathy via LinkedIn, Felicia of the Reverse Logistics Association. Great to have you. And, of course, one more, Professor Mohib, AA, from the air capital of the world. Right, Greg? Where's that? Tell everybody where that is.
That is Wichita, Kansas. Go Sharks.
Right. And one more. Patrick Kelly is here in the house today.
Man.
CEO,
the produce guru,
founder of the Produce Podcast. We've got our first joint show with Patrick coming up later this week, which we'll be releasing in the weeks to come.
Patrick, all right. Stick around. One of the companies I talked about on Tequila Sunrise last week, a company called Crisp. They may be coming on the show in the near future. So we might actually have some interesting news for you, Patrick.
Stefan, of course, you can't do a buzz without Stefan. Barb Sexton says greetings from Phoenix. Barb, of course, with the powerful Omnia Partners team. Great to have you here with us, Barb. And we'll get to everyone else here momentarily. But quick programming note. Hey, if you enjoyed today's live stream, be sure to check out our podcast wherever you get your podcast from.
And we're going to talk about a couple of those mid-show, right? So
I think so.
So they know what they are.
Yes, I think so. All right. So with no further ado, Greg, let's dive into this first story, and I'll lay it out a little bit, and then I want you to weigh in on what you see here. But this should not be new to anybody. We've been talking about SKU rationalization for weeks, if not months. And by the way, Fred Tolbert, great to have you back here. He says he's feeling the buzz. Good stuff there from Fred.
I am talking directly to you, Fred.
That's right. All right. So we've been talking SKU rationalization forever. According to Emma Cosgrove and the Supply Chain Dive team, where this story comes from, the Coca-Cola company based right here in Atlanta has announced a new, quote, ruthless approach to SKU rationalization.
Yeah.
So let's define it first, Greg. Let's make sure everybody's on the same page. It's very simple. Simply put, SKU rationalization is a process by which merchants determine if a particular product is kept on the shelf and still produced and sold, or if it should be discontinued based on mainly its profitability, its overall movement, how much demand is there for it, right?
Yeah.
So it's a constant. It's been around forever. Retailers have been doing this forever, and we've seen them double down on these efforts to just keep product on the shelf in many ways and to streamline production here during the pandemic. So Coca-Cola's CEO, James Quincy Gregg, said, James Quincy, not James Quincy Gregg, but I was talking to you, Greg.
Okay, he can have my name if he wants.
That's right.
In Atlanta, so they get what they want.
They get what they want. People get what they want. All right, Mr. Quincy said last week that a company's SKU rationalization will be put on steroids, not only applied to individual products, but extended to entire brands. Brand rationalization, truly. Like most companies in recent weeks, the Coca-Cola company has focused on simplifying and prioritizing production to keep certain products on the shelves, just like we mentioned a second ago. That work has encouraged the company to possibly keep this streamlining approach on a more permanent basis, which probably shouldn't surprise many folks. Quincy said that, the CEO, Mr. Quincy, said that Q2 2020 would be their toughest quarter, and that they'd see the financial gains of this company-wide effort in the months to come. Of course, on that note, like for many companies, Q2 2020 revenue was down almost 30% for the same quarter over 2019. One of the first examples of this Coca-Cola initiative, which we talked about a week or two ago, Odwalla juice brand became officially discontinued here at the end of July. Odwalla juice brand. If you enjoy it, you better stock up because it's going away. Unfortunately, they're cutting 300 team members and removing 230 trucks from its refrigerated direct to store delivery operation. DSD. You'll probably hear a lot more about that. DSD.
Yeah.
But did you know, Greg, Odwalla juice, the whole brand, is one of 400 brands that they have at Coca-Cola.
I did not know that there were 400 brands. That is pretty impressive. I did know. So Odwalla is a kind of a favorite brand in our household. My eldest daughter was a competitive swimmer in college at Georgia Southern, Hale. And we didn't like her drinking the kind of chemically energy drinks or recovery drinks. So it was chocolate milk, apple juice, and Odwalla. They had something called Bee Monster. I think they changed it to Blueberry Bee when Monster brand came out, because blueberries are really great for organic energy. So it was a staple in our household to have that stuff around, and it's kind of a sad day. There are other brands out there, but it's kind of a sad day to see that go away because it was a very good product. So,
well, it is a sad day, but it is not surprising. These days, whether if it's Coca-Cola products and brands or other food industry brands, or for that matter, across supply chain, if it's not driving demand, not driving transactions and revenue, right now, most global supply chains have to really focus to keep, especially especially food and beverage items on shelves. So get this.
Yep.
One more thing. This was interesting to me, Greg. And when I thought more about it, at least in our household, it makes a lot more sense. So the company, the Coca-Cola, is going to be focusing more through these efforts on recognizable brands, because as their CFO, John Murphy, suggested at an industry conference last May, consumers want to get in and out of stores really quick. So naturally, they're going to be picking brands they recognize. And that is one of the factors they're considering as they go through this brand rationalization initiative. So, Greg, more comments. What's your take?
Yeah. So the inverse of SKU rationalization is called SKU proliferation, and that has been an issue in the industry for decades. It's one of those situations where, and I was a merchandiser. Sometimes they're called category managers. There are all kinds of titles depending on whether they're in a CPG brand or whether they're at a retailer. But their job is to find products that expand reach to new or within the customer base, right? So you're always looking for new products, sometimes developing them yourselves or with your suppliers. But what happens is you don't typically rationalize your SKU count, so you don't peel off those non or lower performers at the bottom, because you're afraid they might, you're afraid they might take off, and it becomes a very ethereal management style. And this is a great opportunity for merchants, merchandisers, and category managers to become more data-driven, because the reason that it makes sense to rationalize the SKU, and this is important, goes directly to supply chain. The reason that you would rationalize SKUs is because it's costly and difficult to manage that long tail that we always talk about in supply chain, those slow movers with erratic demand. You always are over inventoried on those products. You're out when you shouldn't be. They're very difficult to manage. So this allows companies to do that. So the master of SKU rationalization is Costco. They don't even carry products that are below a certain threshold in volume. because too much of the inventory is made up of just in case inventory that sits there and collects dust.
Yep.
So that's how Coca-Cola will make and save money by doing this.
Plus, companies are fighting for that shelf space, right? All those third parties, whether it's Costco or Walmart or whatever else, they've got to sell it. Lots of rationalization just to get on the shelf, and then they got to probably fight to keep stay there. So,
and that's a good point. I'm not sure that people outside the States, certainly, maybe a lot of people in the States, don't realize that Coca-Cola pays for the shelf space that they get. They pay the grocery store chain for the run of shelf that they get, and so do a lot of other brands. So they want to make sure they make good use of that shelf space.
Yep.
Let's see what the gang has to say.
Yeah, no kidding. They're lively this Monday morning. All right, so reaching back out, Pierre, great to have you here. Isabella, great to have you here with us today. Wilma via LinkedIn, great to have you. I think we had a couple comments here. We already saw Fred that he is feeling the buzz. Love to have you here, Fred. Always a pleasure. Junith, if I said that correctly, good morning from Dubai. So hope this finds you well. Great to have you with us here today. Of course, Sylvia Judy, part of the Supply Chain Now Insiders. Sylvia, we look forward to having you on a live stream in the weeks to come. Umar, joining from Mali versus LinkedIn. Great to have you. Thomas Brenniger. Now, Thomas is a veteran that is moving, I think, from Middle Tennessee to upstate South Carolina, and he's kicking boxes. Looking for the next challenge. Enjoyed the program. Great to have you here, Thomas. And
hey, share what your gifts are, Thomas. Maybe somebody right here needs them.
That's a great point, Greg. Yeah, Thomas, please brag on yourself. Throw up a few bullet points for what you do, maybe what you're looking for. All right. First question comes from Stefan. Would you guys say that after reducing SKUs more than usual, the remaining SKUs, which are probably the core products, increase in quality? It's a great question. Greg?
First of all, nothing on the planet is better than Coca-Cola. I have tried to kick the habit, but
not a sponsor. Not a
sponsor. I mean, how could we possibly have any impact on their business? It's the biggest brand in the world. I've been a Coke addict for a lot of years, and it's impossible to kick. Let me tell you, I'm a huge fan. I tried Diet Coke, and I always go back to Coca-Cola. A lot of people say it's too sweet, whatever. It's nectar of the gods. But yes, possibly. Certainly, the quality of products run on the same line will increase. So I have become a connoisseur of certain products, Entenmann's chocolate donuts, and I can tell when they have run something on the line, and the box that I got was the first of the run because you can taste just the slightest hint of whatever ran before. So yes, that will undoubtedly have some impact on quality, but more importantly, it will have greater impact on the top and bottom line. I believe, Stefan, that it will accrue to the benefit of the core products in terms of sales. People will go back to those things they love from the things they have diverted to.
I don't know about increasing quality, but I think like we're seeing, it's increasing the consistency and the availability, and it's limiting some surprises because you can focus your resources on certain production lines instead of your entire portfolio of products.
Yeah, that is so distracting. I mean, it's hard to overstate. I mean, anyone who's here and is in a hard goods industry or any other industry that has long tail of slow moving products, they can attest to the fact that is terribly distracting and costly to manage that segment of inventory.
Agreed. Jeff Miller says shortage of AI is driving a lot of this on the flip side of soft demand. And he includes a neat article that I think he shared with me via LinkedIn privately earlier about there's a severe shortage of 12-ounce cans, which is interesting. Oh, he's not talking about AI. He's talking about aluminum.
Oh,
you see what he did there? Not AI. We talk so much about AI. It's AL, aluminum, right?
Yeah.
All right. We had a few of the comments here. Obed is joining from Ghana. Great to have you here. Looks like he is in supply chain working on a certification in Ghana via LinkedIn. Great to have you here, Obed. Shida who is a dear friend of mine from way back when, from APIX and ASCM days, fellow supply chain practitioner. Shad, I hope this finds you well, and great to have you here today.
In a minute.
It has.
I love that saying.
That's right. All right, Benjamin Goldklang. So Benjamin is answering Stefan's question. His thoughts there is it depends on what type of quality of product, doubtful, but quality of supply chain responsiveness, possibly, and I would say absolutely.
Undoubtedly.
Yeah, undoubtedly. Yeah. That's what they're after. Good stuff there, Benjamin and Jeff. Yes, I was a little bit slow. We talk about AI so much, so you tripped me up there. But yeah, aluminum, shortage of aluminum. Sophia says some people have the skill to identify where their Coke was manufactured due to the different sweeteners used. For example, sugarcane. Greg, do you have that skill?
I do. In fact, whenever I can get Mexican Coke here in the States, Mexican Coke in many states, what do you call that? Something corn syrup, right? Anyway, the wickedly awful corn syrup that is used in the, what is it called?
High fructose
corn syrup, right? It's a sugar substitute. I can tell the difference, and I prefer real sugar like it was when I was a kid of Mexican Coke, because in a lot of countries, high fructose corn syrup is illegal.
Here is an interesting, Faisal says that Coca-Cola got rid of the 2-liter pineapple flavor in Kenya. It was a fast-moving product. Why?
Because it's terrible. That sounds terrible. No, I'm just kidding. Actually, I love pineapple juice, but I don't know. That's It could have to do with supply. I mean, to go back to Jeff's comment, it could have to do with supply of pineapple at this moment in time.
Yep.
That could be it. I wonder when that happened, and also whether that was a carbonated or an uncarbonated beverage. That could have some impact.
Yes, and what else was in there? Lots of great documentaries. We've been at home. Netflix is as a really fast. Either Netflix
Everyone
or Hulu.
A documentary expert, yeah.
That's right. Netflix or Hulu's got a fascinating documentary around sustainability in the beverage industry, and so check that out. But hey, Steve Markham, who we spoke with a few weeks ago, Greg, if you remember, Steve says, switching to a different but related industry, it seems that the beer and alcohol beverage industry is going absolutely opposite direction. How is that working for them?
It's working very well, Steve. One of my companies, Blue Ridge, owns the wine and spirits and alcoholic beverage industry, and their demand is exploding. Though they are having there is some SKU rationalization going on there.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, that may mean that some of the less fast-moving, smaller brews that we've come to know and love that have been acquired by the big companies, they might go away, or at least go away temporarily.
Yep, good stuff. They are that beverage industry, the adult beverage industry, it's been tough to keep up with demand. It's been amazing to see.
I guess everyone but those of us here are day drinking all the time. I mean, if you look on Facebook, you hear a lot about people day drinking. I wish I was one of those people. Wish I could drink that much.
Steve, great question though, and a lot. Yeah. There's going to be so much to analyze when we get kind of in this. Hopefully, sooner rather than later, as post-pandemic area, there's going to be so many business case studies. But good to have you here, Steve. Nirfad is with us. He gets his Coke from a different region. I'll just leave it at that. Great to have you here, Nirfad, and thank you for your social media comments over the weekend on behalf of Greg and I and the entire Supply Chain Now team. Very, very kind to you. Great to have you here. And one other person, right quick before we move to the next story. Carmen. Carmen is joined in via Facebook, and great to have you here, Carmen. Thanks for joining us. Okay, so let's move into headline 2, and this is a big one. And Greg, we should have blocked out a 3-hour live stream when we added this one to the docket, because I think this is going to really generate, I know, a lot of discussion on our side of the table. We'll see how the audience weighs in. So I'm going to pick a few things to kind of set the table a bit. This is another big story. Amazon getting a little bit of scrutiny when it comes to its investment practices. So, according to the Wall Street Journal, over 24 entrepreneurs, investors, and deal advisors are all claiming that the e-commerce behemoth uses the deal-making process to develop competing products.
Mm-hmm.
In some cases, Amazon allegedly invested in the business and then launched competing products, and the business that it invested in tanked because of the newfound competition. In other cases, Amazon supposedly met with startups to discuss takeovers and understand how the technology worked. They declined to invest, and then guess what? They launched competing products. Now, of course, an Amazon spokesman has said that the company does not use confidential information gained from these discussions to build competing products. That's what they said, their response. Former Amazon employees have said that a couple big factors really lead to the perfect storm, which is fueling a lot of this. On one hand, the company has, of course, an intense focus on growth and competition, right? And on the other hand, it's got vast, enormous resources to innovate and launch products and services. And it's gotten really good at that, both areas. They say the company just can't help itself when it comes to developing new technologies that may rival and compete with current Amazon investments, which is interesting. So, Greg, this comes on the heels of an April report by Wall Street Journal as to how the company was using data collected from third-party sellers in an underhanded way. Before you respond, though, I want to share my favorite quote from this article. And those that may be connected with us on LinkedIn may have seen this. Jeremy Levine of Bessemer Venture Partners, when he's speaking on their investment practices, it's like they are not in any way, shape, or form the proverbial wolf in sheep's clothing. They are a wolf in wolf's clothing. Great. I mean, what a great quote there by Jeremy, just telling it like it is. And I know he's preaching to the choir on this show at least. But all right. So, Greg, a lot there. Please weigh in.
I have some personal experience with these alleged practices, from which I am legally excluded from making some very specific comments. So I'm not going. I'm going to address the contents of the article, but I will start with this, as the comment stream has noted. If you jump into a pit of snakes, don't be surprised when you get bit. There you go. An 800-pound gorilla is going to behave like an 800-pound gorilla. So, I am absolutely certain. My opinion. Let me stipulate. This is my opinion. I'm absolutely certain that this happens. I can neither refute nor affirm that it is intentional. But it absolutely does happen. So, look, if you go to 3M or you go to Walmart or you go to another company, anytime you go to another company, you are putting yourself at risk. And the truth is, and I would say this to any founder, if your product is that easy to knock off that they can meet with you and knock it off, then you don't have a very good product to begin with. I mean, you don't have something that's that unique to begin with. So you have to acknowledge that.
So let me ask you a question, because this also came up when we threw that quote out there on Twitter, and it generated some discussion. One of the first great comments came from Buyers Meeting Point, which is an outstanding supply chain and especially procurement organization. Y'all check that out. Kelly Barner, good friend of the show over there. BMP said, hey, it reminds us of the Walmart days when we were all wringing our hands about Walmart's practices. And that, of course, there was a lot of consensus around that. Greg, I would ask you a question. In 2020 versus 1985, when ideas, when with this technology environment that we're in, and we have access to figuring out how to make things and get it out to market seemingly much easier than 85 when it was the world wasn't nearly as connected. Is it a bigger threat that a behemoth like Amazon, how fast they can operate and take the ideas and the IP and the technology and launch it versus, back when Walmart was coming up, when, it put, I'm sure, I would imagine, allegedly, push folks around. It acted like an 800-pound gorilla, but it wasn't as easy to launch competing services and products. Is that you think there's a grain of truth in that?
No, I don't. I think it was every bit as easy then. It was just less publicized. Right now, it's not the actions that are more ominous or immediate. And I'm not speaking specifically to Amazon, because really where this alleged theft takes place is much more often in technology than in retail.
Right.
Though it does happen with private label products, as Amazon has demonstrated, and lots of companies have their own brands, but it's not more prevalent. No, companies have been stealing technology and ideas from other companies forever. Some big companies stealing from small companies. I actually worked at a company before intellectual property rules were clear. Someone walked away from, at the time, the largest technology and computer company in the world with technology they had built on the job at that company and started an entire company out of that. So it's very, very common in tech, and it is particularly dangerous, though, when you go to someone who's in or could easily be in the business that you are attempting.
Yep.
I will say this, as crazy as this may sound, you are much safer going to a venture capitalist than going to someone who is competing with technology. And that's because the venture capitalists, not because they don't have the ability, they don't have the desire to build a company that does what you do. They have a desire to invest in a company that makes them 10x what they invest by doing what they do. So they may go out and look for somebody who does what you do. They may invest in you, but they are very unlikely to steal, very, very unlikely to steal your idea. Know who you're talking to when you're sharing the ideas of your company.
I think you make an excellent point, backing up a bit, where the competition and the alleged theft of ideas and business models and technology, there's as much going, but there's a lot more transparency and information at our fingertips these days. So it's going to be more easily found. I think that's a great point.
Yeah, you can't hide anymore like you could, right?
But, kudos to the Wall Street Journal for staying on this reporting of a variety of practices. We're big fans here at Supply Chain Now of their logistics report, which comes out just about every day. Paul Page does a great job there. So if you're not tracking that on social, you should. Okay.
Can I just one more comment before we move on? It is not Amazon's fault that they steal your product if you present it to them. It's your fault. Your fault. So, as 800-pound gorilla will be an 800-pound gorilla. Don't jump in a pit of snakes if you don't want to get bit. Right.
All right. You've got a bunch of fans of your perspective there in the comments, and hey, that's why I tag along, rub elbows with Greg all the time. I've got a 3-inch notebook full of Gregisms, and I just bring them out at the right time. So who knows? We'll sell a New York Times bestseller down the road a bit. All right, I want to go back to something. I took the visuals off because Carmen asked about a specific story, and I wanted to just put it out there and share that. So Carmen asked if we're going to be covering the new big scandal at the International Road Union. Looks like there was a financial issue, and it was covered by a couple different groups, roadtocorruption.com, which we don't know anything about. But, when someone puts about a story and comments about a story in the comments, we want to make sure we acknowledge that. We're not prepared. That hasn't hit our radar yet, Carmen. Thanks for sharing it in the comments, and we'll check it out after the show. So I wanted to make sure that we acknowledge a story that evidently is really important from where you come from. Okay, so Greg, we're going to keep driving, and we already covered that great quote. All right, so this is like the intermission today.
Yeah.
We've got 2 more stories coming up. So all of our audience here, stay tuned. We're going to be talking about can global supply chain handle the upcoming vaccine, and diversity in senior levels of leadership in supply chain. Some interesting stuff that Gartner reported last week. So stay tuned for that. We'd love to get y'all to comment. In the meantime, we've launched a couple new series here at Supply Chain Now. Both are, and these are just two of them. Both are more unique than the rest of our content. And for the sake of especially the crowd that always tunes in on our Supply Chain Buzz on Mondays, I want to make sure you are aware of it in case these angles are something that you're interested in. So, Greg, tell us about Tequila Sunrise and what you cover each week.
Yeah, well, topics like the Amazon topic. And so Tequila Sunrise is kind of a combination. What I want to do is keep supply chain technology in the forefront because it is so important these days. It is changing the lives of people at companies, and companies need it now more than ever. So I want to make people aware of what companies are coming, what companies are coming up, getting invested, some even imploding. It's inevitable, right? We're talking in a lot of cases about startups and early stage venture led companies. So we talk about investment, who's investing in what companies, what cool new technologies are being brought to the marketplace. And by popular demand, by Dylan and Fred and
Polly,
Keith Moore, and who else?
I was going to say Polly from Raleigh.
And Polly from Raleigh, yeah, at Kinaxis, and Patrick Van Hull also from Kinaxis. We talk about some of those companies that are moving and shaking. Last week we talked a little bit about Manhattan, who released earnings on Thursday after the show. We talked a little bit about Kinaxis and what they're doing and what their stock was doing and whether we could expect that stock to continue to run like it has. But we also talk about the realities and practicalities of investment. So what are investments looking for? What are investors looking for? We'll have some founder lessons, some of the things you need to be doing to attract people. But, I started off with investor speak. I started talking about seed rounds and A rounds and growth equity. A lot of people kind of put the brakes on me and said, what the hell does all that mean? So I've gone about explaining that. And my goal is for people who are in tech, considered starting a tech, care about observing tech, or maybe even investing in tech. I want them to understand the language, both spoken and unspoken, in investing, as well as what's going on in supply chain tech, so people can learn and be informed and not be surprised when they do something like go to Amazon with their best idea and, cry when it gets stolen.
All right. So really quick on that note, let's see, Jeff, you and Jeff Miller are going to have to grab a tequila or an adult beverage and discuss that, because he mentioned, hold on there, Bucko, just cause you should have known better doesn't mean Amazon's bad behavior is excusable. I think there's a great...
I didn't say that. Just to be clear, I did not say it was excusable. I'm just saying, let me put this very clearly. Don't be stupid, right? Don't be stupid, because as the quote said, everyone knows who Amazon is, right? So use your head. I would suggest, by the way, you don't go to IBM or any of these other companies with those kind of ideas either.
Yep.
So I didn't say that their behavior was excusable. And in fact, as you might recall, Jeff, I did state that I had been a party to allegedly similar behavior. Okay. So I have to word that very carefully.
Yes, I was curious where you're going there. All right. So Tequila Sunrise, we've had a lot of feedback. I think we're only 6 or 7 episodes in, and
6 is coming Thursday.
6 is coming Thursday. All right, give us one thing. So one question we got from Stefan about where they can find this. You can find Tequila Sunrise currently in not only the main pipeline of Supply Chain Now, but it's also pretty much everywhere you get your podcast from. So if Tequila Sunrise really appeals to you and you want to make sure you get it, you can search for that Apple Podcasts or Spotify or what have you. That'll be its own independent channel. It already is.
Yeah.
All right. So Greg, give us a teaser. What's one thing that you're going to be talking about in this coming Thursday's episode?
I'm going to be talking about a major tech player who got a major investment and why that may or may not be a good indicator for their future.
Outstanding. I can't wait. Let's go ahead and do it now. That'd be a great conversation. What a great series with a unique niche. And we were talking earlier before we went live today, Greg, or maybe yesterday. Your background. I mean, you are the perfect host, expert extraordinaire for this type of series, especially giving folks information on, I've got plenty of blind spots when it comes to investing and how these things take place and the models and you name it. So I think a lot of folks can benefit, especially if you're in the startup early stage community, or for that matter, if you're looking to acquire and make some smart investments and get a sense of what's going on in the supply chain space. So good stuff there. Tequila Sunrise.
Just to be clear, if you think everything I learned and I'm sharing is because I did everything right, absolutely. A lot of what you can enlighten people with is your own failures or failings or those sorts of things. And truthfully, Scott, this is how we started working together. This is what I have dedicated my life to doing, is keeping founders from making those mistakes because the process is obfuscated or misunderstood or unspoken, right? We are speaking the unspoken on Tequila Sunrise.
Love it. Love it. Also love the fact that Sylvia Judy is making, if you know Sylvia, if you've been a part of our previous live streams, you'll know that she makes a lot of jams. Blueberry jam, I think in particular, is one of her well-known products. Well, she's now making blueberry-infused vodka, a byproduct of the jam. New favorite, Quarantini. That's what she's calling it. Good stuff there. All right. So other quick news series is This Week in Business History. If you're a history nerd, history dork like I am, you'll want to check this out. So we try to take liberties when it comes to supply chain. All right. We want this to be a big, broad umbrella so that if you've got a little sliver of interest in global supply chain, this could be a series for you. Or if you're a practitioner that can't get enough, this could offer up some great historical context for some of the biggest brands and stories you see today, tracing it back to their roots. So
Scott,
yes,
tell us about your most recent episode. At the risk of everybody leaving this episode and going to listen to it right now, tell us about your most recent episode.
We'll make this brief because we didn't intend for this to be a commercial, but the Apollo program we covered 2 weeks ago, and especially some of the business benefits that came out of that. NASA does a great job, which I learned, tracking a wide variety of developments, innovations that come out of all of its work at NASA. And they've got a team of employees whose sole job is to track what comes out of NASA programming and launches, you name it. So the Apollo program, which is such a landmark achievement for all of humanity, that was a neat episode. And then this what we released yesterday was all about the cannabis industry. And if you don't know, cannabis, the industry itself is a $12.5 billion industry in the U.S. And what's funny, we were talking about this earlier, is it's largely had a foot and one arm tied behind its back to get to this point. And there's a number of different factors that attribute to where it is and where it's going. I can't remember the number that I shared just yesterday. I want to say 33.5 billion by 2025 is where that industry is going. So we talked a little bit
total. So I happen to be on the board of a company in a tech company in the cannabis industry, and they're expecting lots of consumer products to have cannabis, either THC or non-THC. It's over a $2.5 trillion market.
Wow.
Trillion with a T. That's the $1 trillion question. So Scott's last 2 episodes, all about getting high. So, and who better to do it? Well, I'm actually fascinated. I haven't gotten to listen to your most recent episode lately, but the Apollo episode was to quote somebody who said, I think it was AA, who said, "Who do we have to thank for writing and narrating that episode?" And it's you, Scott Luton.
Well, hey, I appreciate the comments and the feedback on both these new series. It's a passion, like Greg put it earlier. It is a passion. It comes from a very genuine position and what we want to do and how we want to give back. And it's a pleasure to be able to research and dive. And frankly, I'm not an expert in the cannabis industry. I had to do my homework and really piece it together to understand kind of the roots and why it's here and where it's going. So y'all check it out. We'd welcome your feedback and appreciate the opportunity to share these with our Buzz audience here today. Okay. So moving right along,
fun today. Are you having fun with these folks today? I love watching this feed.
they're having, I think they're having more fun than we are. I love some of the back and forth.
Yeah.
And we should acknowledge Jamin, who is talking about new series. Jamin, if you have not connected with him on social media, he is a supply chain, but also particularly a logistics and transportation guru. And he's just one of the most positive and uplifting folks you're going to be around. He's launching a new series here, so stay tuned for that and connect with him, in particular on LinkedIn if you haven't already. Great people.
Also a Chiefs fan.
Which was like a litmus test. All right, so Buzz headline number 3, everybody. We're talking about, is global supply chain prepared to deliver on a potential vaccine? So believe it or not, many say no. Yeah. And let me tee this up for us here. In this report, via the Hindustan Times and Bloomberg, I try to go to Bloomberg first, but they only give me the first paragraph, so we had to find it via a different distributor.
That's a whole nother discussion.
Yes, no kidding.
Making the listeners pay for news or viewers.
Yeah. Many industry executives and analysts say global supply chain just isn't ready. Greg, we're familiar with many of the conditions that they cite: financial challenges with trucking companies, shrinking capacity on container ships and cargo aircraft, and a general lack of visibility for many supply chains. And we'll talk about why that's important, even more so for the vaccine in a moment. Mm-hmm. From a variety of reports going back months, we're all also mostly familiar with both finding a successful vaccine and then just how how challenging it is to produce it on a global scale. But the article says that the devil is in the distribution. So check out this quote from the article. Quote, "The infrastructure powering the global economy is scaling down for a protracted downturn, just as pharmaceutical companies need to scale up for the biggest and most consequential product launch in modern history." Wow. End quote. So also this factoid I thought was an interesting one from the article. Julian Such, I believe is his last name, with Emirates Sky Cargo, they estimate that a Boeing 777 freighter could carry 1 million individual doses of a vaccine. That'd require 8,000 planes to cover just half the world's population. And the article talks a lot about air cargo because of two things: speed, getting its speed to market, but also since the vaccine's got to be refrigerated, it'd be a lot easier to make sure that it happens on shorter trips. And on that note, one of the bigger challenges is the refrigeration that vaccine will require. It needs to be between 35 and 46 degrees Fahrenheit, most likely. Any variance is going to render the vaccines useless. So Merck and Company, right, a well-known pharmaceutical player, their CEO, Kenneth Frazier, said in an interview on Leadership Live on Bloomberg Television that often people are talking about the scientific conundrum of coming forward with a vaccine that works. In some ways, maybe even a harder problem is what you just put your finger on, which is distribution, end quote. Two last items real quick from this article. One is airport capacity, right? Because even if you can mobilize and even dip into more passenger planes, we all know how they've converted those for air freight purposes. Let's say let's just say you have all the aircraft at your disposal you need. You still have to fight for the airport capacity, even during these challenging times where there's not as many flights. And you've got to do so very efficiently because you got to protect the timeliness of that vaccine and the temperature. And then secondly, perhaps I would argue this might be the biggest challenge, is fairness and accessibility. even once you have, and as you're building this grand blocking and tackling strategy, right, of distribution, global distribution, how do you make sure that everyone it's available for everyone, and how do you measure that? How do you put the right system in place? I mean, this is a big ordeal. So, Greg, before we get our audience to weigh in, what are your initial thoughts there?
I don't think a vaccine is going to be a problem, because I think I still subscribe to the original science before everything got all mucked up, that this is going to be more like the flu, pneumonia, cold season. We're going to have COVID season. So there was a doctor at Harvard, I can't pull up his name right now, Dr. Mark something, who said, get ready to settle in, but we're probably going to be facing COVID for the next 12 to 18 years, not months. But I think let's just say a vaccine is able to be produced after we spend $1 trillion trying to build one, then we have to make sure that distribution is fair, but it doesn't have to be fast. I mean, we have clearly identified who is most impacted by this illness. It is the infirmed, right? Those with comorbidities are at a exponentially higher danger, and those above 65, and then even greater those above 85. So we simply prioritize those people who are at the greatest risk. I don't see that this is that difficult of a problem to solve, right? We vaccinate the weakest, the most likely to be at risk in society.
Yep,
and that will limit the strain on the supply chain.
Love that. And maybe, to your point, that's excellent perspective. Let's start there, right? Let's knock out that the folks that are most at risk and protect them, and then once our global supply chain really, because it's going to take, it's not going to launch out of the gate and hit everything within 2 hours. Like Amazon, like your favorite e-commerce provider. So there's going to be
the way that we talk about this really concerns me. Like, it's imminent, which it's not,
right.
and that it will be right the first time, which it won't, and that there won't be an evolutionary process that there always is with vaccines. So
yes,
I think we have to cool our jets a little bit and be a little bit more, a little bit more analytical than hopeful here,
yes.
and recognize that this is a process, and it is a 1 to 3 year process at the very least.
Yeah, the article, and I would invite everybody to go check out the article, because I think while there are some very strong statements made, I think on the balance of the whole article there, it takes a measured approach and kind of just says, hey, matter of factly, this is where we are, and this is what we're going to have to tackle. I mean, like Greg said, it's just that's part of launching new global supply chains to begin with.
Yeah.
There's a Flexport executive that really put it out in frank terms, in this industry roundtable that I'm not sure if the article put together or an association put together, but we need, what it I don't have it at my fingertips, but what it really reminded me of is the value of just sheer frankness, candor, and honesty right now. Let's be honest with where we are, what we need, what we can do, what we can't do yet, and then what it's going to take, to make that happen and fill that gap. So, but well put, Greg. I like that. I like you bringing us back down to earth. Great article, though. Check it out, whether it's via the Hindustan Times or Bloomberg or your favorite supply chain publication.
Yeah.
All right. And there was a variety of great comments that we're not going to be able to get all to. I try to share most of them in the via the visuals, but love to see everybody weighing in. And one person in particular, I think it was Keith Duckworth, said that, hey, if we got production taking place globally rather than just one location, of course, that's going to make things a lot easier. So we'll see how it plays out. All right. Our final story of the day, Greg, you're going to be leading us through some recent research from Gartner.
Yes.
Which focuses on diversity in the senior levels of supply chain leadership. So please take it away.
Yes, with 3 daughters, 2 in the workplace and 1 in post-secondary education. Well, let's see, less than 4 weeks from starting post-secondary education. Anyway, this is something that particularly hits at the heart of my interest. But Gartner, the 5th annual Gartner Women in Supply Chain Survey by Dana Stifler, Vice President, Research Vice President at Gartner, talks about diversity in the senior levels of leadership in supply chain, specifically women in the C-suite. So to quote Dana, lack of progress is not something the industry can afford at the moment. And she's speaking about this moment in regard to transition and advancement and career impact of the COVID-19 and post-COVID-19 environment. So let's look at some of the numbers. So this is a survey that's been going on since 2016, and the numbers that you see on the screen there start in 2016 and proceed through 2019. So in 2020, in 2020, 17% of chief supply chain officers in the 177 organizations surveyed are women. That's about 30 individuals, so everybody knows there. That's up 6 percentage points over 2019 and 9% since the first year of the survey. So it's moving the right direction, but I'd like everybody to look at, especially those last couple of charts. It's not a distinctively upward trend, right? It's kind of been flailing and popped up, and we had an anomaly, obviously, in 2019 in some categories, and in 2018 in others. But consider this: women are still highly underrepresented in the executive suite. Over 50% of the professional supply chain workforce are female. 39% of the overall supply chain workforce. So obviously, there is the opportunity, the possibility that women could be at much higher levels or greater numbers in the positions we're talking about. So that's one issue. The second issue is that pipeline is an issue. So Corinne Bursa, who was the chief marketing officer at Logility, she had a comment in the last week, which Scott posted, and I think 10,000 of us or so commented on, right? Where she is specifically called this out, that pipeline is an issue here. So one of the concerns, as you can see from the chart in the next to last column or set of columns, is women in director and VP roles have remained pretty flat over the years, and a little bit of an anomalic spike in 2019. So in 2020, this year, 63% of the respondents said they have active goals, objectives, initiatives to try to recruit women, build pipelines, and that sort of thing. But it takes years, as the study points out, for this activity to really strengthen the pipeline. So one of the things that is a bright spot here is that consumer goods and retail, their representation of women in positions that could move to chief supply chain officer is much higher than in industrial organizations. I can tell you from being a retailer, that's simply a matter of more women being in the retail and CPG trades than in the industrial trades. So the effort needs to start at initial recruitment, not just elevating to VP and director and potentially chief supply chain officer positions. So part of the reason that they state for that is that industrial organizations prefer a STEM degree. I can't tell you the number of times we have talked about STEM and getting women into STEM with some of the female leaders we've had on the show, and we'll talk about that a little bit as well. But as industrial organizations prefer a STEM degree at a much higher rate, for over half of them prefer that for their hires. Only just under 40% of retail and CPG prefer that for hires and for elevating people into these executive roles. So there's I want to quote Ms. Stifler about something in regard to pipelines. So this is kind of a long quote, but I think it's important. Not a single respondent cited employee resource groups as a top action for progressing women to senior leadership roles in supply chain. Leadership development programs or improved work-life balance also didn't make the list. However, 21% that's of respondents claim that integrated pipeline planning is their best approach. This reinforces what we have found over the years. The right place to focus for diverse senior leadership is the pipeline and the decisions that support it. So, and that, again, that's from the vice president analyst at Gartner. So one thing this article didn't do was kind of round it out and give us some solutions. So I went to another article that I had been studying for a while by Deloitte, and they actually presented some potential resolutions because, as is quoted here, those sort of groups, which are, I don't want to say support groups, but they are peer groups to kind of help people express themselves more than to help them move along, I think. That seems to be the effect based on that quote. There were some pretty precise recommendations made by Deloitte in their study. So one of the things they cited was intentionality in upskilling women to pull them under the tent toward leadership esteem in the organization. That means get them involved in management and management training, present them back to the organization as potential leaders, and continue to prepare and enable them for that leadership role. More mentorship, and this is really important, more mentorship and sponsorship programs in STEM. The Deloitte study points to programs like Maker Girl. If you're not familiar with that, it's really cool. It's getting young girls or high school age girls, I think, involved in 3D printing, and of course, Girls Who Code. If you don't know what Girls Who Code is, I don't know where you've been. But to build interest and skills in female students. Academic partnerships, roundtables, and other initiatives with universities. We've got to start building the pipeline before people get into the workplace, so that they have, first of all, they have the affinity for the role, because that's as big a problem as the skills for the role. There's nothing magical about men doing supply chain that a woman can't do, but the affinity for the role is presented at a much, much younger age, it appears, for men. So one of the last things is leadership development programs aimed at not only at senior leadership, but VP and mid-level leadership, to build leadership skills early in the career phase. So those are some really tangible things, as opposed to kind of the catchphrase things like resource groups and leadership mentoring and that sort of things. There's some very tactical things you can do in there. I think we'll put the article, right, the link to that, both articles, in the show notes so you can get that. But Scott, I got to ask you this. We talk to women leaders in the supply chain all the time. Right. I think immediately of Cindy Lago, Sandra McQuillan, Tandria Bellamy, Tanya Allen, dozens more. I know I have one, Monica McCombs, who is a leader in food supply chain. What are your thoughts about how we enable more strong female leaders in supply chain?
Huge question, and one that we could do an all-week live stream and still, be at surface level in many ways. But I want to invite our audience to share. Some of them already have. Stefan talks about mentorship. Sylvia talks about how globally it's even worse in terms of global logistics C-level positions occupied by females. I think there's one thing.
Well, yeah, that's an excellent point. In fact, I think it was the Deloitte article made a really, really good point that there are proportionally more women in CTO roles, Chief Technology Officer roles, than CFO or COO roles. So the STEM thing must be working to get women into CTO roles. We need to be more intentional about all C-suite roles, but STEM can also be a help for supply chain.
Yeah. I think we must be more intentional about the definition of diversity in all of its facets, all walks
Yeah.
of life. I think that's something that sometimes these studies, not that, look, you got to have the studies, you got to have the data, but it can be lost in the shuffle that it's just two definitions of diversity, alpha and beta, male and female. But I think what's really important, and to your initial question, is we've got to be willing to have the uncomfortable conversations and seek first to understand and not feel threatened, because it's not that zero sum game. Everyone can win. So many studies out there talk about, from a data driven standpoint, what can be gained by ensuring there's healthy levels of diversity at all levels. When I think about supply chain, I think we're on a mission, Greg, to give a voice to all, a voice globally, folks that are passionate, that they don't get a chance to share the story. Oftentimes they're in the trenches, they're making it happen, and they don't get enough recognition. Frankly, when I see numbers like this, while we've got a number of efforts going on to diversify that voice, it's just nothing's good enough, because collectively the industry is not, we're just not, to your point, how'd you put it earlier? You said that based on what the trends were, it was not decisively upward.
Right.
I can't remember how you put it. That is so true, because all too often, and we saw it play out in the social media commentary, is folks hang their hat on that 1 year, year-over-year gain and think, okay, this project's done, let's move on to the next project. And that's one of the biggest challenges we're up against when it comes to systemic lack of opportunity for all. And, again, for me, it's what we're trying to do. Have the uncomfortable conversation, help facilitate it, help fill in those gaps that we all have in our perspective, and don't feel threatened. Be genuine and lean in, to steal that phrase from Amanda and Show Me 50, to really understanding other folks' perspective from all walks of life. And hopefully that's how I feel, and hopefully it comes across as a genuine path forward.
I think we have to be more, we have to, as you said, seek first to understand, but begin with the end in mind. And we have to measure to the end, not measure whether we have a program. I think that's essentially what both of these studies are telling us. People are putting, and we heard this in our discussion around race in supply chain and in the workplace, right? People are happy to put a program in place and call that progress, right? Let us not distort action with progress, right? Progress is defined by the outcome, and we need to start to measure the outcome, not the action. And when we start to hold companies accountable for the outcome rather than the action, that's when things will change. And there are certain companies out there that have that focus. There are certain that don't yet. But look, I don't think any company wants to hold anyone down.
Yeah.
Right. They just don't know how to lift them up.
Yeah,
and they have to work very hard to know how to do that. I would also state that this is a bigger problem depending on the society that you live in. I mean, we are very aware, very active. We're not very well directed, but we are very aware and very active, and we're getting there in the States. In other societies, it's not. It's not as intentional to be helpful. And in some cases, I mean, I've traveled the world. In some cases, it's actually intentional to be, whatever you want to call it, unhelpful.
Yep.
Maintain the status quo, right?
Yep. So much more heavy lifting
as well.
That's right. So much heavy lifting is still to be done. I'll read this from Amanda here, where I feel that efforts to involve women in STEM programs have huge benefits. The fact is, as Corinne said, Corinne Bursa, the women are there in supply chain. It's the support, encouragement, and opportunities available along their career journeys are what is needed to get women into the C-suite. Well put there. And Sylvia adds to that, inclusion, right? And it's diversity. And I can't remember who put this. I think it might have been DC Mans, Sfregola, sorry. in our last webinar, where she said diversity is not good enough. We got to also equally focus on inclusivity. So well put there, Sylvia. Great point. And Amanda agrees as well. Okay, Greg, love how we tackled and how you tackled this last item here today. I mean, we're talking three, and the Coca-Cola one was important, but some heavy hitters here today. And I appreciate your analysis and thought leadership, making a lot of this stuff easy to understand. And also, what's really important is we don't look at the headline and make a snap judgment without really diving in to what's behind it. I think that is so important. We're all guilty
of good lessons here, right? Yeah. Yep. I think also you have to, I mean, this particular article, I rediscovered something which is cross-pollinate with additional data, right? Because what I saw distinctly missing, and it's not Gartner's job to do this, but what I saw distinctly missing was a resolution to this problem. They are analysts. They're an analyst group, and they announced and identified the issue. It's not their job to resolve it. So I sought out an article that would help us resolve it, because look, here we want to present the news, of course, our opinions, but also resolutions. That's important to us. Yep.
Great point. And love the comments. So we don't have it set up yet, but I want to invite all of our audience. We had an outstanding stand up and sound off program a week or two ago, where we had a very frank conversation on race and industry. And we're planning on following that up with a program in September that is equally as frank and interactive. We started to put the panel together, led by Elba Pereira Gallagher, which if you've ever tuned into our programming, you've probably heard one of her 18 episodes with us. Great stuff. But come out and really participate and share, like Shida is doing here, what you're thinking. So Shida says, I think also there are not too many women that know about supply chain. Every time I say supply, I'm asked, what is that? And Greg, you had some interesting comments around that, I think, just in maybe in the 400th episode, right?
Well, just thank you. I mean, if we can thank COVID-19 for anything, I suppose it is that people now know what supply chain is, right? You know that it is well understood when your parents and your children don't ask you at the dinner table what it means when you say supply chain. But I think it is true. There is a segment of the population who still don't get it. I'm going to tell you that if you don't get it, Latia Thomas, who is about to be a grad of Morgan State University and is the co-president of the Apex chapter at Morgan State University, ask her. She gets it.
Definitely.
And by the way, that's what another thing we need. I don't know who said it first. I've heard Elba say it before. If you can see it, you can be it. Right? I think that's an important thing. And, one of the things that organizations need to do is they need to highlight those female leaders in supply chain to give somebody something to aspire to. Why did I want to be a baseball player? Because I saw Amos Otis make a diving catch and toss me the ball in the stands. We need people to see female chief supply chain officers make a diving catch and save a company from ruin and toss the ball in the stands.
Outstanding visual. And on that note, we're going to have to wrap up for today. Big thanks to all the attendees. We invite you to check out our next webinar. We got a few others in the pipeline. Wednesday, August 19th, we got Rod Sherkin and Kelly Barner, who we were talking about earlier in today's show with Buyer's Meeting Point. They're going to be talking, post-COVID-19 supply chains is getting a ton of attention from a wide variety of folks and organizations, as it should be. Well, I can promise you, Rod and Kelly are going to offer a unique spin on that, especially with a lot of emphasis on procurement. And then if you need anything, we talked about new series. We talked about webinars. We talked about some other upcoming events coming up. There's one great clearinghouse, if you can't find it via Google or anything else.
That's our female chief executive or C-suite executive.
That's right. So either check out our URL, supplychainnowradio.com, or shoot a note to Amanda at supplychainnowradio.com, and we will do our best to serve as a resource for you. But, I can't say enough, Greg. Even everything we're doing is still not good enough. It's not good enough. We got to continually reinvent. It's like SKU rationalization, right? Just because it works last year or last month is no guarantee that it's going to be effective and successful this month or this year. And I think there's lots of transfer to that, to these huge leadership issues and issues of impacting opportunities for all. We got to constantly evaluate and assess and take action to fix the gaps that will appear. So it's like, the new car models, right? I mean, there's always a better way. There's always a better vehicle. There's always a better engine or impactful innovation that brings more to the table. And that's what we try to do here at Supply Chain Now. And very thankful and grateful for everyone that has tuned in and been a part of the conversation today. Greg, last word before we sign off here.
Yeah, I think one of the things we have to do is stop saying it's not enough. One of the things we have to do, we talked about this, I think it was Friday with Amanda. She was struggling with something, and I relayed something I learned when I was racing mountain bikes, which is if you're riding on the edge of a cliff, don't look down the cliff. Look at the path in front of you. Don't focus on what could go wrong or what has gone wrong in the past. Focus on where you want to get to. And I think it's time for us to shift our focus from talking about what we've and leaning on what we have failed to do in the past and start to focus on what we need to do in the future and set all of our energy and all of our efforts down that path.
All right. On that note, as Greg throws the challenge down, which is a good one, really enjoyed today's conversation. Thanks to the audience makes these. As much as I enjoy doing this with Greg, and it's a labor of love, to see the comments and the feedback and what you see and your perspective. I mean, that's what makes live streaming so really neat. So wherever you are, whether from India or Mali or Charleston, South Carolina, or here in Atlanta, thanks so much for tuning in. On that note, hey, do good, give forward, be the change that's needed. Don't look down, as Greg said. Go where you
down. That's right.
That's right. Set the vision and go after it. And on that note, we'll see you next time here on Supply Chain Now. Thanks, everybody.